important to remember, this is real bleeding edge kind of stuff. Okay. They gave a Nobel Prize in 2016. Dr. Medo was doing his research in 17 and 18. This is only 6 years ago. Okay. This is 6 or 7 years ago. So now, but what we're learning is that not all food is created equally. So when you have, and what we have found is that the wheat germ that we use in our product comes from European sources. It comes from northern Italy, southern Germany, Hungary, Austria. It's different than the wheat that we get in this country. Our wheat is very highly industrial produced.
Welcome to another episode of the Matter Over Mind Experience. I'm your host, master trainer, and weight management expert, Narado Zeco Powell. And today, I have the man with a ton of longevity knowledge, Mr. Don Moxley. In fact, he's a director of applied science at Longevity Labs. What Don is known for is taking the complex and making it simple. So you know what we're going to give you today, right? Because with all this information out there now about what you should do and you shouldn't do, this take away from your life, this add for your life. But Don, with all his experience, he was an athlete, and now he's risen to the part of being a director, and he focuses on longevity. He has so much experience to give us, and that's what he's going to do for us today. So with that being said, Don, my man, welcome to the show.
I'm excited to be here. You're down in a part of the country. I lived down in South Florida for a year, working in the cannabis business down there. So I know where you're at, and I know your listeners. So I'm excited to be here with you today.
Your boy's worldwide, my friend. Your boy's worldwide. I hope you know that. So
I'm excited.
We're going to educate the world today. That's what you're going to do, my man. That's what you're going to do today. With that being said, though, let's get this puppy rolling, right? Because you have so much experience from being an athlete into moving into longevity and becoming a scientist, right? So everything that you've experienced and what have you learned, have all that contributed to your knowledge and your approach to longevity and autophagy? Well,
it's all built on itself. That, I started down this road, back in 1980. Leading up to that point, I was a decent high school wrestler. Not great, but I was good. And I was good enough to, I went to Ohio State with every intention of going back to our farm and feeding beef cattle for the rest of my life. But as an athlete, I struggled with injury. And this is 1980, 1981. This is early on. Ohio State hired its first strength coach in 1978. So this is early on in the process. And I said, and we figured out that I needed to get stronger. Now, we had a strength coach there, but more importantly, or just as importantly, I should say, I had a teammate whose roommate at the time had the third longest shot in the world. His name, and he used to train at this gym out on the west side of Columbus called West Side Barbell, and a guy by the name of Lou Simmons. And if you know strength training and you know powerlifting, you know the name Lou Simmons. And this is how I met Lou, learned a lot from Lou, learned a lot from the program at OSU, and wound up changing directions there. I wound up, I got a degree in animal science, but I finished my master's degree in exercise physiology. But the things that I learned as an athlete then became my profession. Learning strength modalities, learning conditioning science, learning these kinds of things. And shortly thereafter, I became a professor. I became an adjunct professor and then an assistant professor. And I've been teaching for about 27 years now. So it all layers, it all builds, all experiences come together and build on that, to the point that in 2015 through 2018, I was back at Ohio State as a sports scientist with the team. We measured 3.5 million data points on a wrestling team in one season. We got to where I could predict who would be All-American before they wrestled their first match at Nationals. So again, using scientific process to constantly look at what are the variables that are preventing someone from achieving their goals. It's called constraint management. You solve the constraint. You solve the element that's constraining the process. And then we've just taken that and grown and being a student of the human body, a student of the organ systems, and now a student of cellular metabolism, we now start to look at this process that's critical for longevity. It's called autophagy. It's an internal cellular cleaning process. And so, and it has ties back to the exercise sciences. This is one of the reasons I'm able to do the work that I do, because we have so much experience in the exercise sciences. But now, again, you know, we try to take some fairly complex issues and make them more approachable so people make behavior changes. You know, because at the end of the day, you know, listen, if your challenge to longevity is the fact that you play in traffic every day, it doesn't make a difference what you eat. I've got to get you to stop playing in traffic, because that's the biggest limiter to your ability to live longer. And then we just keep moving forward. And after you turn 40, the thing that's, and again, I like to talk about longevity science is figuring out what's going to kill you and then eliminate that. So the thing that's going to kill you after 40 is going to be heart disease, cancer, immune response, troubles with your immune response, neurological, Alzheimer's, depression, things like that. These are all inflammation-related diseases. These are all diseases. And anytime that you have high inflammation, you have low autophagy. As you raise autophagy, you lower inflammation. And now we start to look at, okay, where does autophagy, what makes this work? Well, we're all probably familiar with the concept of fasting. Fasting is an autophagy trigger. We know exercise is an autophagy trigger. We know there's certain foods that are autophagy triggers. But more importantly, now we live in a time where we've developed an understanding of a particular molecule called spermidine. This is a molecule we've known about for hundreds of years, but we didn't know what it did until 2016. In 2016, they gave the Nobel Prize to a Japanese researcher that described the genetics of autophagy. And when we had that, all of a sudden, a researcher in Graz, Austria, his name was Dr. Frank Medo. His name is Dr. Frank Medo. Shouldn't speak of him in the past tense. He still lives and does great research. And he's the founder of our company. He's took this spermidine that he extracted from wheat germ, European wheat germ, and he put it in with what's called senescent cells. These are cells that are kind of zombies. They're alive, but they're not doing what cells should do. They're not making the proteins. They're not doing this. Well, he applied spermidine to these, and they reversed back to healthy cells and became doing what cells should do. Well, this was the spermidine drove autophagy, which reduced the inflammation in the cells and returned the cells back to healthy life. So to kind of close the loop on this, we know what healthy behaviors are. Listen, you build a business over it. Your members listen to you on it. Your tribe listens to you on this. But what we also learn is that there's some key molecules. There's some key constraining elements. And what we know is that if you don't have enough spermidine in your cells, autophagy doesn't happen. Okay? Even if you fast, autophagy doesn't happen. It's dramatically reduced. So we're starting to understand that there's some key, we call them small molecules. There's some key small molecules that are necessary, and we know that spermidine is one of them now. Sure. Okay. So autophagy comes from the Greek self-eating, autophagy. And what autophagy does, it is a process that is in all animals, from single cell organisms up to complex humans. And when your body is doing what it's supposed to do, when your cells are working, they're making proteins. You consume food. The sugars and the proteins send a signal to the cell, and the cell says, hey, we've got what we need to do what we do. And it starts to create these proteins. So it reaches into the nucleus. It grabs a little bit of DNA. That DNA goes through what's called a ribosome, and that DNA builds a protein string. Okay? Not all of those protein strings are built correctly. Okay? Some of them are built incorrectly. And if you have that incorrect protein string, it can't go out and do what proteins do. It just sits there and it builds up. And if you think about Alzheimer's and the tau proteins with Alzheimer's, that's the buildup of a type of protein. Well, autophagy, when you cut off food to the cell, autophagy, the cell says, hey, we don't have this stuff coming in. So let's go ahead and clean up inside. So the cell starts this process of autophagy. It peels off a little membrane from a thing called the endoplasmic reticulum that encapsulates the proteins that are not working, and it encapsulates old organelles like mitochondria that are no longer functioning, and it digests them within the cell. And when it digests them, the parts then go back into the cell so it can be reassembled into new proteins, and new mitochondria can be built. And so that's what autophagy is. It's an internal cellular cleaning process. It's the opposite of anabolic. It's catabolic. It's breaking down the parts of the cell that are no longer functional or not functional to begin with.
Which is why fasting is such an important piece in
Bingo.
Health and longevity, right? Because you need the body to get to that catabolic state. Now, tie that in there with, because you with spermidine, what really makes it so special, and how does it directly impact autophagy?
Important to remember, this is real bleeding edge kind of stuff. Okay, they gave a Nobel Prize in 2016. Dr. Medo was doing his research in 17 and 18. This is only 6 years ago. Okay, this is 6 or 7 years ago. So now, but what we're learning is that not all food is created equally. So when you have, and what we have found is that the wheat germ that we use in our product comes from European sources. It comes from northern Italy, southern Germany, Hungary, Austria. It's different than the wheat that we get in this country. Our wheat is very highly industrial produced. And when you're pushing that production, something falls out, and the micronutrient production falls out. So we have not been able to find wheat germ in this country that we can run our extraction process on because there's not enough spermidine in it. And in Europe, we go out and we buy spermidine-rich wheat germ. We test it when it comes to the factory. 25% of that gets into the factory. 75% is rejected. We then start our refining process, which only uses water, to go ahead and separate the spermidine-rich supplement out of the wheat germ, and that's what becomes our product. So, and we measure spermidine contents 3 different times throughout the process, so that when you buy this bottle of Spermidine Life, you know that there's that amount of spermidine that's on the label is in the capsule. So going back to, if you've ever read the book Blue Zones, okay, the 5 areas around the world where people routinely live to 90 and 100 years old. Whereas a really good study out there where they went and looked at their food sources, they're spermidine rich. They grow their own food. They don't depend on industrial growing processes. They grow their own food. And Zeco, I grew up on a big farm in eastern Ohio. We used to have 2 1-acre gardens, and we cleaned our barns to fertilize the ground. The tomatoes that grew in our garden were unbelievable. I mean, they were just incredibly tasteful, nutrient dense. You don't get that when you go to the grocery store anymore. Okay. You get a good, pretty red tomato, but it may not have the nutrient density that you get when you grow your own food. And this is one of the challenges. So one of the things, as consumers, we have to recognize that not all tomatoes are the same. we may need to go ahead and supplement our diet with some of the nutrients that are not in that particular plant. And I like to tell the story. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, packs a bunch of people on a boat in Portugal, sends them across the Atlantic Ocean, land down in the Caribbean, takes 33 days to do that. 100 years after that, men are living on boats for extended periods of time, years at a time. You can put people on a boat for 33 days back then and they wouldn't develop scurvy. But when you put them on the boat for an extended period of time, a lot of those sailors would develop scurvy. And we now know scurvy comes from a vitamin C deficiency. That's why we call them limeys. They use limes as a vitamin C source. Well, there are people on the boat who did not get scurvy. The guys on the boat that ate the rats on the boat didn't get scurvy because rats make their own vitamin C. Okay, so this is where a change in the environment led to a change in the diet and the available nutrients, which is causing a problem. And this is what same kind of thing. We're changing the way we grow our food. We're changing the amount of work that we're getting. And I love the fact that fasting is the trigger. You know, fasting is part of every major religion. Okay? And if you think of religious practices, these are all established prior to science. We weren't doing, this is before we had science and mathematics and things like that. And all of a sudden, we knew that fasting was a benefit. That's why it became part of the practice. Prayer is like meditation. That's why it became part of the practice. Okay? So when we start to bring this into modern times, we now have the science, and I still think you should fast, and I still think you should pray and meditate, but we know scientifically what it's doing. And that's what we get with this process. And again, 2016, don't let that date go away. They gave a Nobel Prize less than 10 years ago. Okay, that's how cutting edge this is. And it's kind of cool science.
That is very cutting edge. My work is known for being three-sided. So I look at ancestral living, and when you tie it in, I'm a faster. I fast daily, and I do a lengthened fast once a week on Sabbath. I also pray and meditate, which you say is also important. So those are ancestral living, right? And you said our ancestors knew things, even the way they prepared their food back then. Like they knew things that we just seem to be figuring out now. Then I also look at the evidence, right? So I look at how does it make us feel, right? That's an important part that we can't just neglect. If I drink alcohol and I feel like crap, I don't need science to tell me it's not good for me. Now, at the same time, I also look at science, and when I'm sure you're just like I am. You've been in this industry long enough, you know, to put those three things together. You cannot eliminate one. And when you put those three things together, that's how you really you move to that next level. You become optimal, which is what I'm hearing, which is extremely important, right? Now, don't leave everyone, because, you know, I got one more thing. I want to talk about his work with his students at Ohio State. We're going to dive into that a little bit more. But before we do so, I want to give you a gift. I want to tell you about one of my favorite companies, probably my favorite company. Who knows, right? It's called The Amino Co. They make a product called Heal, 100% science-backed essential amino acid-based formulation designed to reduce recovery times and increase physical function by accelerating muscle repair by helping you maintain a healthy, wait for it, inflammatory response. Because that's what we're talking about, right? A healthy inflammatory response. Heal is such a wonderful product. It has essential aminos, not just branched chain, not those three, but essential aminos, along with creatine, which are two of my favorite supplements, and whey protein concentrate, blended together in a particular blend by Dr. Robert Wolf, that it's so great. I mean, you start drinking it and you'll feel amazing. In fact, I drink Heal sometime throughout the day, or I will use it as an intro workout to help me bang through the second half. Because you know, when your boy is training, your boy goes hard in the paint, right? Absolutely fantastic product. There's a recent clinical trial that compared 1 or 2 scoops of Heal with high quality whey protein. And the response to Heal was found to be 3 times larger. And 3 is my favorite number, by the way, everyone. 3 times larger on a gram to gram basis So check it out. It's absolutely fantastic. It's packaged in a way that your body can use almost immediately. Absolutely love this product. If you're using essential aminos and creatine separate, you want to use Heal because it has it all together in a blend that is very good for you. I'm telling you. And it has natural flavors. And you know your boy goes for natural as much as I can. So the natural flavors are my favorite. So check him out, and it tastes really, really good. One day I ran out of Heal and I went to the store and I was like, I need some essential aminos. And after a couple of days, my stomach started hurting because it wasn't used to all the extra crap that most other companies use. But Heal, Amino Co. use some really good, high quality stuff. Now, the website is aminoco.com/Zeco Health. And when you click on the website, you get a 30% discount. 30% discount on some fantastic products. But because your boy is a nice boy, I'm saying, nice boy, nice guy, I'll make sure that the website is in the description of the podcast. So you click beneath the description of the show, you're able to click on there and get 30% discount on some fantastic products. Now, with that being said, I want to talk about Ohio State, man. Like talk to us, Don. Tell us about the work that you did with Ohio State students, and what were their benefits led to health and longevity, well-being?
Well, with an athlete, we're not necessarily looking at longevity. We're looking at human performance on, in my case, it was wrestlers. It was on the mat. And what happened was, I'm an alumnus of Ohio State. I wrestled at Ohio State back in the early 80s, and have been involved with the program ever since. And the current coach reached out to me in 2015 because he was struggling with one of his athletes. They couldn't figure out why this kid wasn't performing. And it was essentially an overtraining issue. And I diagnosed it using heart rate variability tools. We used a couple products that frankly aren't available anymore because that market's kind of crazy, but you can get a lot of things on HRV, and essentially he was maladapting to his training, and meaning that you do a training session, you should recover, you should get better, should get stronger. He wasn't. And it was a lack of recovery that we're able to diagnose with this poor heart rate variability. So stepped in at that time, helped them modify some things with this one particular athlete. And at the time, they had an athlete that had won 3 national titles and was coming back to win his 4th. And at that time, only 3 other guys had ever done that. So, and we had a freshman class. We had 3 guys in the freshman class. One went on to become an Olympic gold medalist. They were all 3 4-time All-Americans and all 3 national champions at one time. So we had a lot of points, but we needed a few more points to win that title. So this athlete that I was working with, Kenny, we went from where he was stealing matches 2-1 to where we got him through Big Tens, and he made All-American that year, using training techniques and using training intensities that were based on his readiness rather than what the coach thought he should do. And this was it's important to separate those two. There's a lot of people that will be successful doing what the coach thinks they should do. Okay, I'm not debating that. But there is a subset of individuals that will not. There's also a subset of people that should do stuff different than what the coach recommends. And we can use science, heart rate variability, heart rate training, things like this, use data, collect data, make data-driven decisions. And this is what we did with these athletes, so that by the time I finished up there in 2018, we were measuring about 3.5 million data points a season. Heart rate variability. If they did something, we measured it. And then we turned around and ran correlational studies. So in my wrestling room, I had 38 guys. I had a group of 9 that had been All-American or better. And so that means they're top 8 in the country. These kids were national champions, Olympic medalists, things like, so they were better than just an 8th in the country. I had a group of guys in the room that wrestled for us, had started for us, but had never made All-American. And then we had a group of guys in the room that had never started for us. So, but they all trained together. They all trained together in the same environment. So we wanted to analyze what data was predictive of an individual's ability to go from group 3 to group 1. Well, And then once we got him into group 1, what could we use to predict whether they'd make All-American or not, whether we maxed them out? So this is the work that I did at Ohio State. And you know, it was very informative when you start to collect data. Now, I had a very small budget. I had to work with a kid from our College of Business. We were collecting 3.5 million data points. We had to bolt together 6 different Google Sheets because Google Sheets won't hold more than 750,000 pieces of data. So we had to bolt together a bunch of Google Sheets. This kid wrote the code to make this work. We built a dashboard, and we got to where we could fine tune these athletes. Going into, until nationals this year, we had scored the most points of any school in NCAA wrestling history except one. Penn State scored 6 more than we did that year. So we finished second. They then turned around and broke their record this year. They're a very good program. But we did this using data to drive decisions. Now, not all data is good data. It's important that you take a look at it and figure out what is, I call it, what is signal and what is noise. Ironically, when I first started this program, I had some of my early data sets. They were relatively small compared to what we finished up. And I went to a professor of big data modeling at Ohio State. I gave him the data. He ran it through his systems, and he came back with this, what's called a spider graph, strength, skills, this stuff. And he points at this kid and he says, this guy right here, that's who you want to model. And I said, Ralph, unfortunately, that's the worst guy on the team, and we're cutting him tomorrow. He goes, and he was shy. He goes, oh, then the data's inverted, because he knows data. He didn't know the wrestlers. So he went back and inverted his algorithms, and all of a sudden my Olympic gold medalist is number 1, which is where it should be. You know, this is the way. And so this gave us the ability to make data-driven decisions, particularly around recovery. What we found is that you have to coach recovery the same way you coach exercise or training. You know, when you're training, we have those 4 variables: frequency, intensity, time, and duration, right? We learn those in school. Well, recovery has the same ones. We have recovery frequencies. We have recovery intensities. We have recovery modalities, and we have recovery time. And so it's the same thing. And you have to program those the same way you program the training intensities. And you can do that we used a lot of heart rate variability work. So you're measuring the time between heartbeats. And from that, we can determine, are you under stress or in recovery? And this is a whole nother discussion that this is a pretty deep rabbit hole, but that was the best part. And, you know, walked away with just some great friendships. You know, Olympic trials are coming up in a couple weeks, and I'm going to go over here to Penn State, which is about an hour and a half from where I'm at right now. And I'll get to go watch 4 of the kids that I coached, try to make the Olympic team.
And that's the importance of science, right? And that's why I say I use different sides to what I do. Okay, even if we're talking about autophagy or we're talking about performance, it really, understanding data and knowing how to use science makes a big difference. And that's why it's important to have scientists like yourself who work with athletes, who work with individuals, who've worked with Nobel Prize winning inductees as well. So that's big. And thank you so much for sharing all this fantastic information. So now, down to that being said, this is your moment, man. Tell my audience, how can they learn more about your work? If they want to get some spermidine, or, you know, what else do you have to share with us?
So if you want to learn about spermidine, you go to the website, www.spermidinelife.us, SPERMIDINELIFE.us. That's where you learn about spermidine. If you want to follow me, learn more about what I do, I think you're better off going to LinkedIn than anywhere. So if you do Don Moxley on LinkedIn, you'll find me. You know, if you don't have some kind of a stupid introduction that you put in the request to join, I'll probably accept it. If you put in there, the system put us together, you look like a nice guy, you want to work together, I'll reject that. Ask a question that's legit, and I'm in. And I have relationships now that I've made with people across the world that reached out to me. They heard a podcast like we're doing now. They said, well, let me just go to LinkedIn. That's the best place to go. I have an Instagram profile, Don Moxley, but that's mainly family stuff. Twitter, who the hell knows where that's going. But my Twitter feed is where I retweet things that I think are good.
Perfect. So I will put the web address, the Spermidine web address in the show notes. It's going to be zecohealth.com/spermidinelife. And also the show notes is going to be in the description of the podcast as well. So there'll be a click on it, access your LinkedIn, access the website as well, have access to all your information. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, everyone. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day, fam.